Before the Vegas lights, before the scandals and the silence, before the rumors of death that shook fans in 2025, there were four young men in Carolina church pews, singing hymns with fire in their voices. They would grow into a group so raw, so unapologetic, that they redefined what R&B could sound like. Gospel cries layered over hip-hop swagger, vulnerability tangled with lust, faith colliding with rebellion. They called themselves Jodeci. By the mid-1990s, they weren't just making music, they were rewriting culture. Their songs became wedding vows, nightclub anthems, teenage confessions, and bedroom soundtracks. They were the bad boys of R&B, the storm that changed everything. But behind the platinum plaques and leather jackets was a story few truly know. A story of gospel beginnings, explosive fame, near collapse, and a survival that defies the odds. This is more than music history. This is the untold story of Jodeci. And if you're ready to step inside the fire, stay with us. Because what comes next is a journey you will never forget. To understand Jodeci, you have to begin not in the flashing lights of New York, not on the charts of Billboard, but in the pews of small southern churches in North Carolina. Before they were R&B's bad boys, before they wore leather and dark shades, they were children in pressed Sunday suits, standing in front of congregations that measured a man not by fame, but by faith. Cedric and Joel Haley, the boys who would become KCI and JoJo, learned to sing in their family's group, Little Cedric and the Haley Singers. In the 1980s, their gospel records weren't chart toppers, but in local communities, they carried weight. Those records were lessons in discipline. Sing with conviction, blend perfectly, and never lose sight of the spirit behind the sound. A few towns away, Donald and Dalvin DeGreat were being molded the same way. Their father was a preacher, their family known as the DeGreat delegation. For them, music was not just a hobby, it was a responsibility. Sundays meant not just church, but practice, rehearsals that lasted long into the night, echoing off wood-paneled walls and kitchen tables. It's here that the DNA of Jodeci was forged, not in record labels, but in gospel choirs. The gospel world taught them call and response, how to cry through a note, how to turn pain into harmony. It gave them the tools to survive in an industry that would test them again and again. But discipline alone doesn't make legends. Fire does. And when the Haleys met the DeGreats, sparks flew. Both duos had dreams bigger than their towns, bigger than the gospel circuit, bigger than the Carolinas themselves. Each had what the other lacked. Cedric and Joel had the soaring, gut-punch vocals. Donald, now Devante Swing, had the musical mind of a producer, a dreamer already sketching beats and arrangements on whatever equipment he could find. Dalvin brought youthful swagger and energy, a performer's instinct. Together, they weren't just four voices, they were a storm gathering strength. By the late 1980s, they began to sense something dangerous. The walls of gospel could no longer contain them. They wanted the world, and that meant leaving everything they knew behind. They packed tapes, demos, and their church raised hunger and boarded buses to New York City. No safety net, no industry connections, just faith and determination. For kids from the Carolinas, New York was a different planet. The streets were harder, the pace faster. But the music industry there offered something small towns never could: opportunity. It was in New York that the name was born. Joe from JoJo, Da from Devante, CI from KCI. Jodeci, a name stitched together like a family quilt, but also like a declaration. For boys, one identity, one mission. But even with talent, New York was merciless. Demos could be tossed aside, voices could be ignored, and so Devante did what few young producers dared to do. He knocked on the door of Uptown Records, the Harlem-based label that had already given the world Guy, Heavy D, and Al B. Sure. Uptown was run by Andre Harrell, a visionary who believed R&B could be sophisticated, fashionable, aspirational. But Harrell also had a secret weapon, a young intern named Sean Combs. Not yet Diddy, still just Puffy, hustling to prove himself. Combs saw Jodeci and didn't just hear harmonies. He saw image. He understood that in a world of matching suits and soft ballads, Jodeci needed to be something else entirely. He dressed them in boots, leather, oversized jackets, and dark shades. He told them to look less like choir boys and more like outlaws. Uptown would give them a home, but Puffy would give them a face. It was a reinvention as bold as their sound, for Southern church kids transformed into the bad boys of R&B. But here's the secret. Beneath the leather and attitude, the foundation was still gospel. Every scream, every moan, every harmony traced back to Sunday mornings in Carolina churches. The edge was the packaging, the soul was real. What New York gave them was a platform. What Uptown gave them was a stage. What Puffy gave them was a story. And so, the legend of Jodeci began, not polished, not safe, but raw, jagged, and unforgettable. They were ready to break out. When Forever My Lady hit the shelves in May 1991, it didn't just add another record to R&B's catalog. It set off a cultural earthquake. The album wasn't marketed with the polish of Boyz II Men or the traditional charm of New Edition. It wasn't about tuxedos, roses, or candlelight dinners. It was about raw love, lust, vulnerability, and truth, dressed in combat boots and leather jackets. And it worked. The title track, Forever My Lady, co-written with R&B star Al B. Sure, was more than just a ballad. For many listeners, it became the soundtrack to their most intimate commitments. Weddings, anniversaries, even hospital rooms where young couples held newborns. This song wasn't background music. It was life's script set to melody. Al B. Sure later admitted in interviews that the lyrics came from his own experience of fatherhood, which gave the song a sincerity audiences could feel. When KCI and JoJo delivered the lines, it didn't sound like studio perfection. It sounded like a promise from the heart. Behind the boards was Devante Swing, the quiet architect of Jodeci's sonic identity. Unlike many R&B producers of the era, he wasn't chasing clean arrangements or lush orchestrations. Instead, he leaned into drum machines, heavy bass lines, and gospel-infused chord changes. Yes, you are. Where Boyz II Men were silk, Jodeci was sandpaper. The beats knocked harder, the vocals cried rougher, the emotions felt messier. And that's exactly what made the album resonate. Songs like Stay and Come and Talk to Me didn't just play on radio stations, they owned them. In high schools across America, dances turned into Jodeci zones. Boys in oversized jackets would mouth KCI's pleas to their crushes. Girls would scream at JoJo's falsetto. The songs weren't simply entertainment. They were teenage confessionals, played out in gymnasiums and basements. And then came MTV Unplugged. For a group branded as street R&B, Jodeci's rawness was often dismissed as style over substance. Could they sing, really sing, without studio tricks? Forever my lady. Their answer, a cover of Stevie Wonder's Lately. Just for men, for microphones, and church-born voices laid bare. When the performance aired, critics who had labeled Jodeci as too rough fell silent. The crowd roared, MTV audiences were stunned, and the single soared to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, their highest pop-charting success. It was proof that beneath the boots and bravado, Jodeci's artistry was undeniable. But Jodeci weren't finished. In 1993, they returned with their sophomore effort, Diary of a Mad Band. The project was riddled with label tensions and received little promotion, yet it still debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and went double platinum.
To keep me falling in love with you, girl.
Tracks like Cry For You showed their tender side, a slow jam so haunting it remains a staple of 90s R&B playlists. Freek'n leaned darker, pushing sensuality and vulnerability into near obsession. What About Us carried a bruised defiance, the sound of men growing harder under industry pressure. Here was the paradox. Even when chaos swirled around them, Jodeci's music cut through like lightning. Their flaws, their imperfections, their roughness, these became their brand. By the mid-1990s, Jodeci weren't just an R&B group. They were cultural architects. They gave young black men in the streets a mirror, proof you could sing about love without giving up toughness. They influenced fashion, leather jackets, combat boots, and shades became the new R&B uniform. They pushed the genre closer to hip-hop, laying groundwork for artists like Dru Hill, Usher, and later Chris Brown. Every group that followed had to answer the same question. Would they be smooth gentlemen, or would they follow Jodeci into the fire? From Forever My Lady to Diary of a Mad Band, Jodeci didn't just release music. They redefined what it meant to love out loud, to ache in public, to fuse gospel spirit with street edge. And for a generation, they weren't just singers. They were truth-tellers, confessing every wound and every desire through a microphone. The breakout was complete, but the reign was only beginning. By 1995, Jodeci were no longer just R&B stars. They had become cultural giants. The name carried weight not just on the charts but in the streets, in fashion, in nightclubs, and in the bedrooms of millions. Their third studio album, The Show, The After Party, The Hotel, wasn't just another release. It was a manifesto, a declaration of everything Jodeci stood for: unfiltered sensuality, raw honesty, and a swagger that blurred the lines between R&B and hip-hop. If one track captured the album's spirit, it was Freek'n You. Bold, explicit, dangerous. This wasn't a love ballad wrapped in metaphors. It was direct, carnal, and almost shocking in its honesty. KCI's raspy growl and JoJo's pleading harmonies turned what could have been a simple slow jam into an anthem of unapologetic desire. Behind the boards, Devante Swing layered a beat that was minimal but hypnotic, proof that sometimes less is more when you want every word to cut through. The song became a lightning rod, condemned by some radio programmers for being too much, yet embraced by fans who recognized it as something R&B had never dared to be so openly. And that was Jodeci's gift, giving voice to the things people whispered about, but rarely sang about in public. Not every song on the album was pure fire and lust. Love You for Life brought balance. It was tender, heartfelt, and became a new kind of wedding song, one that still carried the group's edge, but delivered commitment with conviction. Where Forever My Lady was a vow whispered from the heart, Love You for Life was a promise spoken with the grit of experience. Couples who wanted something deeper, something realer, something with soul, they walked down aisles to this track. It was Jodeci proving they could make passion eternal.
I want you to know that it's for real.
Then came Get On Up, funky, up-tempo, and designed for the club. It reminded fans that Jodeci weren't just slow burners. They could own a dance floor, too. In a decade dominated by ballads and new jack grooves, this was proof they could stretch without losing identity. But perhaps the most important part of this era wasn't even on the official track list. It was happening behind the scenes, in Devante Swing's creative hub known as the basement. Imagine it. A basement studio filled with hungry young talent, sleeping on couches, living off takeout, and recording day and night. At the center was Devante, equal parts mentor, producer, and mad scientist.
If there's any doubt in your mind,
In that space, future icons were being shaped. Missy Elliott, honing her quirky delivery and songwriting wit. Timbaland, developing a production style that would later redefine hip-hop and pop with its futuristic beats. Genuine, practicing smooth vocals that would carry Pony into immortality. Tweet, sharpening a voice that would cut through in the 2000s.
Jojo, Devante, and Casey Dalvin.
The irony? While Jodeci were ruling the charts, Devante was quietly building the next generation that would inherit and expand their sound. The DNA of late 90s and early 2000s R&B can be traced back to that one studio. Without the basement, the soundscape of the new millennium would be unrecognizable. By the time the show, the after party, the hotel settled into rotation, the stats were undeniable. 3 consecutive multi-platinum albums, 5 #1 R&B singles, a crossover hit with Lately, a fashion influence that reshaped how male groups presented themselves.
it's been so long.
Even critics who once dismissed them as too raw or too street were forced to admit the truth. Jodeci had redefined male R&B. They weren't imitating tradition. They were rewriting it.
I don't know.
The mid-90s belonged to Jodeci. Their music wasn't just heard, it was lived. Couples claimed their songs as soundtracks to first loves, weddings, and heartbreaks. Hip-hop artists began embracing R&B collaborations more freely, inspired by Jodeci's streetwise cool. Young producers studied Devante's methods, unknowingly preparing for the Timbaland and Missy Elliott revolutions ahead. In short, Jodeci's reign wasn't just about chart numbers. It was about reshaping culture itself. In 1995, Jodeci stood at the summit. 3 albums deep, their sound was everywhere, their influence undeniable. They had brought gospel into the streets, raw emotion into R&B, and edge into the mainstream. It seemed like nothing could stop them. But as history often teaches us, peaks are followed by valleys. And for Jodeci, the storm clouds were already gathering. Every empire has its collapse. For Jodeci, the descent came quickly, and it came brutally. By 1996, after 3 multi-platinum albums and a cultural reign that stretched across fashion, sound, and swagger, the group suddenly went quiet. There was no farewell tour, no dramatic breakup press conference, just silence. While Jodeci as a unit retreated, 2 of its members stepped into a new spotlight. Cedric and Joel Haley, KCI and JoJo, pursued their own path as a duo.
As I gaze into your eyes, to feel you warm.
Their debut album, Love Always in 1997, spawned All My Life, one of the most enduring love ballads of the era. Unlike the gritty sensuality of Jodeci, this song was gentle, melodic, universal. It topped charts worldwide, played in weddings and proms, and introduced the Haley brothers to a new audience.
Feel the same way too.
But behind the polished success was a story of mounting pressure. Touring without Devante and Dalvin meant carrying the weight themselves. Every performance, every interview, was a reminder that while KCI and JoJo thrived, Jodeci was vanishing. For Devante Swing, the architect of Jodeci's sound, the late 90s were not golden years. His genius as a producer was unquestionable, but he struggled to maintain stability. Rumors circulated about financial disputes, unfulfilled contracts, and volatile studio sessions. Dalvin, the youngest, dabbled in solo projects, but none captured the momentum of Jodeci's glory. Without the collective energy of the group, their individual pursuits felt like fragments of a broken mirror, each piece reflecting brilliance, but none holding the full image.
All the things you told me.
At the same time, the very stage Jodeci once dominated was shrinking, and by the late 1990s, R&B was being edged out of mainstream radio. Hip-hop was taking center stage, and the industry began treating R&B as a side act rather than a headliner. For a group built on bridging gospel soul with street grit, the cultural tide was turning against them.
No one for me.
The music business was changing, and Jodeci, absent and fractured, risked being forgotten. And then came the scandals. In 2001, KCI found himself in headlines for a lewd conduct charge tied to a performance at Los Angeles' Shrine Auditorium. The case became tabloid fodder, overshadowing any musical ambitions. Instead of being remembered as the voices that had defined black romance in the 1990s, the brothers were becoming caricatures in gossip columns. The more the press focused on chaos, the more distant the music felt. Behind closed doors, battles were raging. Substance abuse and personal demons haunted the group. By 2010, the Haley brothers chose to confront their struggles publicly in a TV One docu-series titled KCI and JoJo, Come Clean.
This is the real KC and JoJo from Monroe, North Carolina.
For fans, it was heartbreaking to watch. These were the same voices that once commanded stadiums, now fighting simply to stay alive and sober. Yet there was also courage in that transparency, a reminder that even legends are human, and even icons can stumble.
KC and JoJo.
For Jodeci as a unit, the silence was deafening. From 1995's The Show, The After Party, The Hotel to 2015's The Past, The Present, The Future, there was nothing. No albums, no group tours, just scattered performances, rumors of reunions, and the growing realization that the group might never return. In the music world, 20 years is an eternity. Entire genres can rise and fall in that span. By the time Jodeci resurfaced, the R&B landscape was unrecognizable. Neo-soul had come and gone, Usher and Beyoncé had defined an era, and a new wave of hip-hop-infused crooners had emerged. When the comeback finally came in 2015, it wasn't about topping charts or chasing radio. It was about survival, about reclaiming a legacy that had been tarnished by absence and scandal. The album The Past, The Present, The Future carried a different energy. Mature, weathered. It acknowledged the years lost, but also reminded the world that Jodeci's DNA was still alive. Timbaland lent his touch to the project, bridging old-school grit with modern textures.
Without you, baby, I feel worthless.
Reviews were mixed. Some critics wanted the wild fire of the early 90s. Others respected the grown man tone. But for fans, the message was simple. The Kings were still here. The years of silence, scandal, and struggle nearly buried Jodeci's legacy. Yet when they re-emerged, it wasn't with apologies or excuses. It was with music. And that music, scarred, older, but still powerful, proved that legends don't disappear. They endure. Let's set the record straight. Despite what the rumor mills, gossip blogs, and social media whispers have claimed over the years, no member of Jodeci has died.
We did the video a couple months back. We're gonna put it up again for you guys. Hope you enjoy.
Yet in February 2025, fans around the world held their breath. News broke that Cedric KCI Haley had been rushed to the hospital with pneumonia. 2 Valentine's weekend shows in New York and Connecticut were abruptly canceled, and for a group with a history of silence, the uncertainty was deafening. Within hours, online speculation ran wild. Was this the end of Jodeci? Had R&B lost one of its most iconic voices? The truth, thankfully, was less dire. After several days of treatment, KCI was discharged, recovering at home under antibiotics.
Where else can I go? I say you're
The panic had been fueled by decades of turbulence. People assumed the worst because they remembered the chaos. But this time, the story wasn't about tragedy. It was about survival. By 2025, Jodeci's very existence was already a story of endurance. 3 decades earlier, they had redefined the sound and image of male R&B. But in the years that followed, scandals, addictions, and a 20-year silence nearly erased their legacy. That's why the pneumonia scare cut so deeply. Jodeci had always represented resilience. Their return wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about proving that survival was possible even when the odds were stacked against them. Fans didn't just fear losing a voice, they feared losing a symbol.
Forever and ever.
Just a year before the health scare, in 2024, Jodeci had achieved something even their fiercest critics might not have predicted: a full-scale Las Vegas residency. Titled the show, The After Party, the Vegas Residency, it wasn't just a clever nod to their 1995 masterpiece. It was a reclamation of history. Picture it. 4 men, no longer in their 20s, stepping on stage in a city built on reinvention. Behind them, neon lights blazed. Before them, generations of fans, some who had slow danced to Forever My Lady in high school gyms, others discovering Freek'n You on streaming playlists for the first time. For nearly 2 hours each night, Jodeci reminded the world that their sound was timeless. The raspy growl of KCI, the pleading urgency of JoJo, the quiet authority of Devante, the stage energy of Dalvin, it all came rushing back. Vegas residencies are often billed as career codas, the final act in a long play. For Jodeci, it felt more like resurrection. The irony of Jodeci's survival is that their music has never been more accessible than it is now. In the 1990s, you had to buy the CD or tape. In the 2000s, during their silence, their music lived mostly in memory and dusty record bins. But in the streaming era, Jodeci's catalog is alive again. Come and Talk to Me, Cry for You. Lately, these aren't just nostalgia tracks. They are algorithm-driven discoveries for a new generation. Young artists sample them. Producers study Devante's arrangements. Teenagers, born long after Jodeci's peak, stumble onto Freek'n You on Spotify playlists and hear something rawer, more daring than the polished R&B of today. Survival, in this sense, isn't just about the men themselves. It's about the music refusing to die. Of course, survival comes with scars. The voices that once soared with gospel-trained ease now carry the weight of years and battles fought. The movements are slower, the stage energy tempered. But in many ways, that makes their performances even more powerful. When KCI rasps through a verse today, it's not the voice of a young man begging for love. It's the voice of a survivor, a man who knows what it costs to still be standing. And that authenticity resonates in a culture often obsessed with youth. For older fans, it's a reminder of their own endurance. For younger listeners, it's proof that longevity matters more than hype. Today, Jodeci stands for more than the hits. They represent the complicated journey of Black artistry in America. From the gospel pews of North Carolina to the glamorous lights of Las Vegas. From church harmonies to chart-topping ballads about lust and love. From scandal-ridden headlines to a narrative of survival and resilience. Their story mirrors the story of R&B itself. Born in faith, tested by industry, nearly buried by neglect, yet surviving through reinvention. The rumors of death were just that, rumors. What matters more is the undeniable truth. Jodeci are still here. From small-town choirs to MTV stages, from platinum plaques to public struggles, from silence to Vegas spotlights. Theirs is a journey no one could have predicted.
What's up, YouTube? My name's Cliff. Yo, my name's Dewan. What up? My name is Jonathan. And I'm CJ. And together we are.
And maybe that's what makes Jodeci's survival so powerful. They weren't built to be polished. They weren't built to be perfect. They were built to endure. And in 2025, against all odds, they still are.